So the femur doesn't just really rest in the acetabular socket. There's actually negative pressure in that joint. That is to say that there is a suction effect, keeping the head of the femur in the socket of the acetabulum. So there's something called the labrum, which is basically a form of thick cartilage which extends the walls of the acetabulum. So the acetabulum may cover, I said, maybe 45–50% of the joint, but it extends it just beyond the halfway point, beyond the 50% mark to, I don't know, 55–60% or so around the femur head. So it's almost like a hand reaching out to grip it, or like, yeah, I don't know, a hand is kind of good. But it's fascinating because if you separate, if you're in like a dissection table and you separate all the ligaments and muscles and things, the bone will still be in there. It will still be stuck in there until you drill a hole in the back here. And they've actually done that. And when you drill a hole in the back here, just like, you know, taking a straw that's full of liquid and holding the liquid in with your finger, if I remove my finger, the liquid falls out. Well, if I drill the hole, then the bone comes out quite easily, which goes to show this sense of negative pressure or suction up into the hip. Now, I find this to be a very useful image in the embodiment, and oftentimes a very surprising image for people. So with the sound, we're working a bit on this sense of the weight of the bones resting into one another. But you can also imagine this inward negative pressure sucking the bone, the leg bone, up and in, or sucking the pelvis down onto the wall of the femur. And of course it does this with flexibility as well. So it keeps that pressure even though the joint can move in all these different directions. So go ahead and think about that. If you imagine now the 7 shape of the femur, you start to realize that the main arch of the pelvis, of which the sacrum is the keystone, actually initiates all the way down the leg, right? You can really see it on the skeleton here, that the archway comes up the side and then it travels across, the sacrum is the keystone, and then back down. And this happens because of that head or offshooting arm of the femur, right? That top part of the oblong 7 creates actually an inward push. So this is part of what's creating that stability through the pelvis. It wouldn't be the case if the bone were straight, right? It would in some sense, because it would still be via the pelvic half pressing up to the SI joint, but this just adds to that effect, right? We have this whole outward in-pushing thing, which creates, right, this image, I have this image, but it creates these lines that really start to answer that original question about the pelvis, which is, how does the body transfer weight from 2 columns, the legs, to 1 column, the spine, right? And some of it is the head of this femur pressing in and creating this archway. So as you start to imagine, like when we felt the shape of the femur, you start to imagine, okay, here's this big arch now, going from the knees, it's kind of going out, and then it comes in, and then in the back it connects to the sacrum, and I have this arch. You can imagine that arch, and then you imagine that there's this suction effect, right? So if I lift my leg up, like it can't fall away because it's actually suctioned in, plus there's a ligament inside the socket holding the femur in. But go ahead and imagine that now. Feel the feet, feel the arches of the feet, feel the heads of the femurs, and imagine 2 things. First, the balancing weight image. That gives you a certain feeling. You might take a few steps. You might jump or squat or lean or stretch. And that gives me a certain feeling of how I move, and it creates a certain effect in my sensation. Now go ahead and change the image to that negative suction. It's like, right? You can add the sound. It goes, and now my femur heads are sucked into my pelvic half. Now it's not that either is right or wrong, right? The point of an image is to have an effect. And when I use the first image, there's a sense of sort of floating ease, you know? When I use the suction image, there's much more of a sense of stability, right? All of a sudden I feel like I could just balance here. Maybe my movement, it feels a little bit inhibited from that image, but inhibited is the wrong word. It's more like, it just feels like a different quality. One feels like air moving, and one feels more like honey or water. So imagining that suction and that idea of the pelvic arch actually initiating from the greater trochanters to the heads of the femurs. From the greater trochanters to the heads of the femurs, and then being sucked on. So with that suction feeling, go ahead and try to jump and land. And you can really feel the suction as you're landing because there's more pressure driving into the femur head. It makes my landing feel totally different when I make the sound than that. That has a sort of bounce rebound up, and the suction, I really feel this dropping down into the earth. You could try jumping with the suction. It actually feels like it decreases my jump height. However, I also feel that I'm connecting down more, and in some sense more efficiently harnessing the energy of the ground. And then I can try it without. There you have it. If you enjoyed this video, sign up for the InBody Space newsletter and share the link with a friend. You can also find original content on Facebook and Instagram.